Hey everyone, how's it going? So, as the year winds down, there's just a handful of games left to be released. Some from this year have been great, while others not so much. As you can tell from the thumbnail, we're taking the low road and looking at 10 of the biggest disappointing video games of 2024. Now, it is worth noting that just because something is labeled disappointing doesn't mean it's completely terrible. A game that doesn't do well still might have some great features. Just like a game that sells well doesn't mean that it was a hit with critics. Keeping that in perspective, there have been a handful of games that this year created a lot of hype but ended up disappointing fans in various ways when they finally were launched.
In New Orleans, they call the ride.
Starting off our list with Alone in the Dark. Now, Alone in the Dark was meant to be a fresh take on the classic 1992 game of the same name. The original was a trailblazer in the survival horror genre, and its sequels pushed the boundaries even further. The last game before this year, Alone in the Dark Illumination, came out almost a decade ago at the end of 2015, and it didn't exactly win over critics then. With Alone in the Dark 2024, there was hope to win back fans and attract new players. The game borrowed some ideas from Resident Evil remakes, like changing up camera angles. Sadly, this revival didn't hit the mark though. It fell short of which fans, critics, and the company were all hoping for, which ultimately led to Pieces Interactive shutting down. When it comes to games from Annapurna, you can usually count on them to deliver a unique art style, a talented cast, and an engaging narrative. I went into this game expecting a solid story, but it turned out just to be an easy way to rack up a 1,000 gamer score. So, when Open Roads was announced, many people naturally thought it would be another narrative gem like Gone Home, If Found, or Florence. Unfortunately, it ended up feeling pretty shallow. Even with great voice acting and a cool blend of 2D and 3D art, the main focus, the story, was a huge letdown. The characters felt one-dimensional, the plot lacked any standout moments, and everything just seemed a bit too neat and tidy. In the end, it felt like the video game version of a Hallmark movie, and let's be real, if you're not my grandmother, that's not exactly something to get excited about. My grandma loves Hallmark.
This is gonna be great.
Free gunning.
Number 3, Concord. Now, Concord turned out to be a major disappointment this year, both commercially and critically. While the gameplay had its fun moments, a lot of fans were not happy with how the characters looked. And the main problem was definitely the price. In a world where free-to-play games are the norm, Concord came out with a $40 price tag, which made it tough for fans of games like Overwatch 2 and Apex Legends just to jump right in. It's a real bummer too, especially considering the potential the game showed. But just 2 weeks after it launched, Concord was already shut down, leaving it completely unplayable. To make things worse, Firewalk Studios also closed their doors shortly after that. Well, we're 3 games in and 2 studios already shut down.
Target blinded.
Star Wars Outlaws. Now, this might sound a little rough, but I did hear from some people that actually played the game that it did have its good points. Still, the fact that fans feel the need that they had to defend it suggests that it didn't quite hit the mark. Now, lately, Star Wars games have been kicking ass. You know, there was Jedi Survivor and its sequel. Those were awesome. Unfortunately, Outlaws, thanks to Ubisoft's overdone open-world approach, doesn't keep up with that trend. The visuals and the character models are pretty lackluster, and while there are a bunch of cool gameplay ideas, they just don't all come together very well, especially those frustrating instant fail stealth sections. And let's not forget the bigger issue. The main character is just plain boring. Sure, Star Wars Outlaws has its highlights, but it's definitely not the standout title many were hoping for, myself included. I'm gonna be honest, I'm still gonna check this out when it comes to Game Pass, or if there's a decent price drop.
Get in with the underworld's most dangerous.
Number 5, South Park Snow Day. Now, I've been into South Park since day one. It's creeping up on 30 years now, and the last 2 video games were fantastic. Between the stick of truth and the fractured but whole, South Park really nailed its video game adaptations. So it's pretty disappointing, actually it's very disappointing, that South Park Snow Day didn't get much love. Now, there are a few reasons why Snow Day missed the mark. Like, it's got a weak story, but the biggest issue is how disconnected it feels from the South Park universe. For instance, the humor in Snow Day feels like it's a cheap imitation of South Park's signature crude humor. The writing just doesn't have that same sharp wit that we expect, and it leans on the same tired jokes again and again. Plus, the gameplay's got some flack too, with too many fans posting that it just lacks any depth and creativity. It's a multiplayer, real-time fighter. The enemies have horrible detection. You swing, you miss things. It was bad. Like, you know, you don't want to have repetition all the time, but I would have so loved if this game was just the third in the trilogy, just like the previous two games.
Got weapons here.
It's the apocalypse!
Prepare to die. Kick that
Number 6. Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. Now, the Arkham series has a huge fan base, even though the original trilogy wrapped up almost a decade ago. The Batman Arkham trilogy was hailed as a high point in single-player gaming, so when Suicide Kill the Justice League was announced as a multiplayer looter shooter, it definitely caught a lot of attention. Sadly, that initial buzz quickly faded into disappointment. Fans had been eager for a sequel to Arkham Knight for years, but what they got with Suicide Squad was a far cry from that. Many felt that some character portrayals were pretty disrespectful, and it was definitely a weird shift for the series. The gameplay also let a lot of players down, as it involved a lot of grinding and didn't really bring anything new compared to the more refined games. Including Gotham Knights, it's strange that the last two DC games I played kill off Batman.
You think you're a team now?
Next up, Skull and Bones. So, when I found out that Ubisoft was working on a pirate game to compete with Sea of Thieves, I was looking forward to it. After all, Assassin's Creed Black Flag is still hailed as one of the best pirate adventures out there. You'd think that they'd have some practice in the area too, but if your only experience was with Skull and Bones, you'd never have guessed it. The unfortunate truth is that the naval bottoms are actually really good. The downside, the gameplay is designed for a live service model, which turns everything into a monotonous grind. The quests are dull, the story fails to engage, and when you're not in the middle of a sea battle, the core mechanics feel tedious. Overall, it's a solid idea, but it's just been so over-commercialized that it comes to the point where it loses all its charm. Here's a pirate joke for you. Why did the pirate buy an eye patch? Because he couldn't afford an iPad. Let
me show you how we do it.
Multiverses. For those who might not be up to speed on its journey, Multiverses could seem like a strange pick. It did snag the title for Best Fighting Game at the Game Awards in 2022, right after its early access launch. Now that it's fully launched, it's back in the running for Best Fighting Game of 2024. This has stirred up quite a bit of a debate within the fighting game community, leading to its presence on this list. Despite its accolades, the disappointment following its launch and subsequent updates hasn't really eased it. If anything, it's made the letdown feel even more intense. Multiverses had a lot of potential during early access, but it came with its share of issues. Many players were hoping for improvements, but some problems, especially with the balancing and progression, have only gotten worse. The game hasn't done well in sales due to a bunch of issues, but since it's free to play, there is a chance that it still could bounce back eventually. Funko Fusion. Most casual gamers can usually get on board with a LEGO game. They're simple, easy to pick up, and feature popular franchises. Plus, they mix clever and silly humor that appeals to both children and adults. So it seemed like Funko Fusion was destined to be a hit. With a similar gameplay style and a ton of recognizable characters in Funko form, it looked like a guaranteed family-friendly winner. But honestly, it turned out to be a total flop. The game feels like a cheap knockoff of a LEGO title, missing the magic that made most of those games so enjoyable. It's packed with technical glitches, the combat and puzzles are confusing and way too hard for a family game, and it quickly became a boring grind. It's still a broken mess, and it's likely to stay that way, so don't be fooled by those cute Funko faces. If you want to waste your money, buy the figures, not the game.
All your powers.
Right where I want you.
And number 10, LEGO Horizon Adventures. Yet another game that had me like, I like Horizon Zero Dawn games, and I like the LEGO games. So LEGO games are a huge deal in the gaming world, especially for the younger players. But even beyond that, there are a ton of players who grew up with these games and are always excited for a new release. Unfortunately, LEGO Horizon Adventures seemed to have missed the mark and didn't really grab the interest of either group of fans. In the end, it looks like a game like Horizon just doesn't fit well with the LEGO style. The biggest issue with Horizon Adventures is that it feels pretty dull, especially since the level design doesn't do justice to the expansive world that was Horizon Zero Dawn. And that's my list of 10 disappointing games that came out in 2024. Now, you know what I'm going to ask you guys to do. Down in the comments, what was your most disappointing game of this year? I'd love to hear about it. And if you can't think of one, just tell me a game that was really disappointing in the last couple of years. I'd love to see what you guys have to say about the subject. That's going to do it for me, guys. Take care, and I'll see you in about a week. Bye.